When I was 20, I was out of a job and didn't have any university or plans on going to university. I was basically lost in limbo without knowing where to turn next. I was living at home and spent hours on the internet, staying up all night and sleeping all day. I was always a bit of an introvert that preferred the company of me, myself, and I. Staying up through the night and disregarding the day was a way out of the norm and avoiding people altogether. Then I got the classic talk from my dad that all kids get when they're useless, sitting at home doing nothing. I was tired of hearing it, so I decided I needed to move out to continue my lazy, antisocial behavior. I have family way up north in the sticks. There is nothing around except a couple sawmills and a couple nickel mines. My grandfather has a piece of property that is over 350 acres of unexplored bush. It was hardly farmable, just a giant section of woods, streams, ponds, and rock. My grandfather has a timeshare in Florida, so he was gone for the rest of the year. I called him and asked if I could go up there to live. In exchange, I would do lumberjacking for wood to sell and use. I remember his comments exactly. "Yeah, I don't give a shit, you're wasting your time up there. No work, no school, no people, no internet. But if that's what you want, go ahead and knock yourself out, just don't burn down my fucking house." My bags were already packed. I knew he wouldn't mind. I told my dad what I was doing. He was pretty much speechless and had a look of concern. He then told me I was wasting my life and should go to school. I told him it was what I wanted and needed to do. We parted ways. I got into my '93 Civic hatch that had a shot suspension and bald tires and took a 14-hour car ride to no man's land. I was happier than a pig in I made myself good and comfy when I got to the house. It was given to my grandfather by an Irishman that passed on. He built the house with his family in the mid-1800s as a kid and been there ever since. If you ever seen the Amityville Horror, it looks just like that house but much, much smaller. The stove was an old, black cast iron beast. The kind you only see in movies or on an old historic village tour. It had a large barn full of tools and an old JD tractor, a smokehouse for meats, a large veggie garden, an outhouse, and a chicken coop that wasn't in use anymore. After unpacking and relaxing, the distance and fact I was alone began to set in. There wasn't a TV, internet, or video game in sight. Luckily my grandfather had 2 snowmobiles, a 4-wheeler, a gator and dirt bike, and lots of hunting rifles and shotguns to boot. I figured most my time would be spent outdoors, which was okay, but I was a bit nervous. The next day I drove into town, if you could even call it that. I stocked up on canned goods and cupboard food that could survive a nuclear holocaust. I came back and got to lumberjacking. It was slow at first to remember everything my grandpa had shown me as a kid, 8 to 12 years old, but after 4 or 5 hours I had it down pat. I'd take the tractor, chains, and hooks, a jerry can and chainsaw to the bush. I'd find a cedar or spruce tree, cut it down, chain it up to the tractor and drag it off to the main trail where I had a normal flatbed trailer waiting. I'd then cut it up into 2 to 3 foot sections and stack it. Once the trailer was full I'd tow it to the barn, where in the back was a large, hydraulic wood splitter. I'd split it into 4 to 6 sections depending on diameter of the piece. Once I cut it all, I stacked it all. This was the routine. It was long and hard work, but it gave me a purpose and gave me joy. I thought of myself as a pioneer. I was in the great outdoors, alone, taking down trees and supplying villagers with something they needed to survive. I felt proud of myself, and made cash doing it. While I wasn't getting rich, I had enough for all the amenities that were needed to survive in such a place. I kept this routine for months, and locals began coming to me for wood because it was cheap, and I was a youngster looking after my grandfather's home, who was well thought of in town. Then winter came and everything went to shit. Winter on the farm was one of the most depressing times of my life. Not being able to do much work and have no interesting human contact or internet really brought me down. I reflected on my life and the fact I had no friends anymore because I had abandoned them with no warning. Why I did this, I do not know, but I had some type of mental feeling that I had to leave everyone behind and never speak to them again. I began having suicidal thoughts. The more I thought about offing myself, the more I accepted it as being an okay thing to do. I wasn't religious, so I didn't have the thought of going straight to hell. I viewed it more as, if a goldfish were to die, where do you think it would go? I think it doesn't go anywhere, it is just dead, blackness, no more thoughts like turning off a car for good. I thought about how my family would miss me, and how it would hurt them, but I was so depressed, unhappy and discomforted by my progress in life and the fact I had no one. After a few weeks of minus 30 degrees Celsius weather and brutal snow, I decided to get on a snowmobile, load up my snowshoes, take my rifle and go deep into the bush to end my mental suffering. I had given up on everything. I jumped on the sled at 8 a.m. The sun was brighter than ever. You couldn't look anywhere without squinting your eyes like an Eskimo. The sun reflected off the snowy landscape as if it were a mirror. With a full tank and a jerrycan as a backup, I could go a long ways away. I let the skidoo idle and get warmed up. I was thinking to myself that I may actually go through with this. I kept going over what ifs and buts in my head, as if I were trying to talk myself out of it. I said fuck it out loud and jumped on the skidoo and let it rip. I took the tractor trail as far as it would go into the bush. It ends after a solid 45-minute drive, then turns into four-wheeler and gator trails. I took a trail deeper and deeper. After a solid 2.5 hours of riding, the trail stopped and did a U-turn. It was the end of the track. I then grabbed my rifle and put on my snowshoes. I quickly realized something. I hadn't written a note for anyone to find my body or even know what I had done. I knew that if my parents had no idea what had happened to me, they would wonder for the rest of their lives and it would tear them apart. I yelled out fuck and threw my rifle. I paced towards my sled and repeated what I said. I started to turn and remember I literally just threw my rifle. Shit, get off the sled and walk towards rifle. I bent down and grab it and stand up, then froze stiff. A burst of adrenaline was injected throughout my entire body and turned my cold frame into a steel oven. There was a black figure in the distance hiding behind a tree watching me. It wasn't an animal. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't a man. I ran onto my sled and hit the throttle. I ripped back home and didn't look back. To get back home, it only took me maybe 2.5 hours. I rode hard. I got inside the house, put coffee on and ate fried bologna with beans and toast. As I pigged out, I kept that thing's image in my head and I was wondering what it was. How did it get there? For how long has it been here? Does it know I am here? How could it survive? Is it coming for me? Can it follow my snowmobile tracks? Does my grandpa know? I then decided to call my grandfather in Florida. He didn't answer his phone. He was probably chilling on the beach drinking beers. I thought fuck. I called my dad just to calm my nerves. He could sense something was off about me and asked me what was up. I told him I was out hunting and I seen something. I described what I seen and he went silent over the phone. He took a breath and he said, "Son, when I was a kid living on the farm, me and a girl went back to the lake for a swim. We got there on our bicycles in August. I had my rifle with me because of all the bears that pass through the land. After me and the girl were swimming around and laughing and doing our thing, she screamed and pointed across. I looked across the pond and there stood what looked like a burned up human being. He was charred up, had a bit of head hair. Eyes as bright and blue as I had ever seen. Its arms were so long, its hands nearly came to its knees. It screeched at us with the most insane volume I had heard that birds flew out of the trees. I ran out of the pond, grabbed my rifle and shot at it. It ran into the trees and me and the girl jumped on our bikes and gave it shit all the way home. That was the first and final time I had ever seen that thing. I actually hadn't thought of it in years and years until you told me that you need to be really fucking careful, so in fact, why don't you just come home? It's boring up there anyways. I told him I was staying, and enjoyed it here. I was lying now. More? Do you want it? I got off the phone with him feeling no better. The only difference was I could think clearer. I thought, if this thing is coming for me, it's going to take it a while by foot. I got time. I got the guns and put a loaded one in every room. Some had slugs, some had shells. I also had a hatchet that I sharpened to a very fine thickness with a stone grinder in the barn. If I swung at your wrist with one swift motion, it would probably take your hand right off, or at least leave it hanging by a thread. As nightfall drew closer, I made one final meal and killed all the lights and left all the blinds open for good visibility and to make it hard for whatever is out there to see me inside. I went upstairs, which was 2 bedrooms that had large windows and one walkout balcony. I thought this would be an excellent spot to watch and snipe. As I settled in to see if this thing would come, I began thinking about what I was going to do earlier. I still was depressed, but because I was active and keeping my mind onto something, I didn't feel like offing myself anymore. Maybe that was it, I thought. Keeping active, busy, and productive with a bit of excitement thrown in keeps your mind off shit that doesn't really matter anyways. Just as I was having a bit of a personal milestone, I heard heavy footsteps in the snow. I looked out the window and before my eyes stood that thing I had seen earlier, but now in full view. I got a strong feeling of nervousness and my abdomen tightened and barked at me as if I were about to shit myself at any moment from sheer fear. It was just as my dad described to me, piercing blue eyes almost glowing. The moonlight reflected off of them like the cover of the dark side of the moon. It had the color and appearance of the grit in the bottom of your barbecue if you don't clean it much. I ran out on the porch to get a shot off. It darted off around the house before I could even lift my weapon. Fuck. Ran inside again. Ran to other window, I could see it again, just standing there like an idiot watching me. I turned the crank, and the window opened up. I said, "Who are you?" It didn't respond, it just stared at me. I repeat, "Tell me who you are, or I am going to shoot you." It then said its name. It said in a slow, drawn-out harsh hoarse voice. "Jurdak, my name," I said. "What do you want with me?" "I am minding my own business. What are you doing here?" "Please leave me." It then walked closer to the house and looked up at me. My nose was filled with the most pungent odor ever. It then said, "If you won't, I will," in that same exact voice that can almost not be described unless it was mimicked with some type of computer sound program. I said, "Do what?" It said, "Kill yourself, you failed." My heart froze. I decided not to do it. It then stretched its arms out to the wall of the house and began scaling it like it was fucking Spider-Man. I yelled and panicked from sheer shock and fumbled my rifle. It flew right out of the fucking window, and by that time it was feet away from the window. It reached its god-awful hand into the window and cut my arm with its fingernail. I grabbed my hatchet and buried it in its forearm, and it made a sound a bear makes when you shoot it. It fell to the ground on its side, and I ran for the spare gun in the room. I came back to the window and it was running for the barn. I took a shot, but it didn't do much. This gun had a shell and it isn't ideal for the range I fired it. I pushed my dresser to the hall and pushed it down the stairs. I then pushed the bed to the hall and pushed it down the stairs. I then pushed a few end tables in the staircase. I essentially clogged it up so it couldn't get up there from the main floor. I know it can climb now, but I'd prefer to only have to cover 2 sides than multiple sides. I locked the door and just kept my eyes and ears open. I didn't see it again. Daybreak came quick. I could see its blood droplets in the snow. I climbed over and pulled shit out of the stairs and investigated. It was nowhere to be found. I grabbed my rifle and followed the droplets. It went down the tractor trail. I walked for 10 minutes following this trail. I could see it go off even further and its foot tracks as well. I decided it wasn't worth it to go ahead and hunt it. It probably went as deep if not deeper the first time I had seen it. I decided it was time to leave this place for good. I went inside, grabbed my clothes, got into my car and started driving off. I never told my dad or my grandpa. I still have nightmares of these things and wonder how it knew what I was thinking or going to do. I've been trying to research other sightings and descriptions of it, but can find nothing, unfortunately. I don't want to say it is a demon because I really don't know or believe in that religious crap. I don't know what it is, no idea. All I know is for the last 8 years since it has happened, I have had a slew of health problems and bad luck. I have night terrors of Jurdak almost 95% of my sleeps. I have to take medications just to fall asleep. I think it may have been the nail that cut me when it reached into the window. I often wonder if it is still up there. I know that isn't a worthy ending to the story, but it is what it is. What else can I say? Awesome story, OP. It's neat that it could talk and had a name. How tall was it? Did it just look like a charred human? Or did it have any strange, animal-like features? Also, I'm not sure about the health problems, but I am sure that the dreams will stop. However, in order for the dreams to stop, you must confront the beast and end it. Once and for all. Tourist here. Fucking awesome story, OP. I am genuinely spooked. Spoiler, but it's not true, right? Spoiler. I think it may have been about 6 feet 3 inches or so. Quite tall. It had a very long face, a large overbite. It looked human but not human, almost like it was missing some chromosome or something. Maybe one day when I get a death wish, I'll head back and go for it. My grandpa passed away 4 years ago. The property was sold to clear cutters by my dad and his sisters. As far I know, the house was knocked down, and they put up a small office and living quarters for the lumberjacks who clear cut there. This is near Chapleau, Ontario, off the beaten path. That's a little unfortunate. Maybe you could pose as a reporter and call the clear cutter barracks or visit them and ask if anyone has seen anything. Arm yourself and hunt the motherfucker down. If I wasn't so far north in Quebec, I would probably go. I actually dissed that maybe 3 years ago. The workers had already been there for a year. I actually said that I was a fisheries and wildlife technician for the region and that I had heard of a sighting of a creature, described as the one I encountered. They said they hadn't seen anything of the sort. You got to remember though. My grandfather's land had boundaries, but past those boundaries the bush simply continues on crown land for miles upon miles. It's basically a frontier. I somehow doubt it is dead because my dad had seen it. I had seen it over 25 years when he seen it, and it knew my thoughts. There is something about it that isn't natural. Also, I hammered it in the forearm with that axe. I know for a fact I broke its forearm bones because I heard them break. I also know the axe went all the way through its arm because the flat back of the axe was buried into its arm. If it's like you and me, that kind of wound in minus 25 degrees Celsius. Whether it's highly possible it did die, but I don't know, man. I think about it a lot. I sometimes wish, like you guys have said, that I continued on and tracked it, but I was spooked. It was cold and I was shook to my core. Yeah man, it did happen. Bro to bro. Never knew you could feel that kind of fear and worry up to that point. As I said before, I need antidepressants, sleep meds, and now I have a valve in my heart. I am only 28. I have no history of family health issues. I was an athlete growing up. I was an outdoorsman. It all went downhill when I left. I never told my dad or my grandfather. I thought my dad or my grandfather would want to go hunting for it. And I really didn't want them to get hurt or worse. LOL at people Google mapping Chapleau. Come on, you're not going to see it on a satellite map.
The summer after senior year is filled with many happy memories that many of us will never forget. This is not one of those memories. Be me, 18, living in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. Senior year is about to get out and it's been warm lately. Let's fucking rage mate.jpg. Plan huge senior skip day party up by a lake a town over. There are actually 2 lakes near the next town. One is lower than the other, and the higher one is warmer and used to fill the second one during the summer. We decided the best bet for the party would be at the higher lake, because less cops, more forest to run and hide in, and more privacy for our heathen ways. Fast forward a couple days to the day of the party. A metric fuckton of people are headed up to swim and party with us. Probably more like 20, but we filled 2 Suburban and 1 pickup. Driving up, everyone is cramped and excited, singing along to songs and drinking. Pretty fun time. The road we were on was pretty windy, with a steep hill going up on one side and smaller downward sloping hill leading down to the lake on the other. We pull off to the shoulder and a small army of hormones unloads into the water. Water is warm, girls are pretty enough, and the drinks are flowing. We don't even hear the man come up on us. Suddenly a girl, let's call her Brittany, starts screaming and pointing at him. We all look and kind of freak out because he has a gun in the crook of his arm. He laughs and introduces himself as Wayne. Drunken friend Nick offers him a beer and me and a couple others start talking a bit with him. Eventually the issue of the gun comes up and Wayne explains that he's hunting something in the woods. I remember this specifically because he was pretty vague about what he was after, and I was thinking we're going to relieve Deliverance tonight and I'm just praying I'm not going to be Bobby and have to squeal like a pig. Of course drunk ass Nick tells him our plans for the night, camping, partying, etc. Wayne gets a little quiet and says that tonight might not be the best night for that. Ignore that shit, I'm a drunk teen. PDF. Eventually Wayne fucks off to go hunt Sasquatch or whatever. Side note about Wayne, last summer he was actually killed up by that lake. There was an article in the papers about him being some master tracker and living out in those woods for long periods of time. I don't think his death had anything to do with the later events of this story, but the general consensus around the town at the time of his death was that the news story was bullshit. Anyways, a girl Shannon decided that her and her boyfriend would go set up camp. I guess that's what the kids are calling it these days. They take the pickup up the mountain more to the site and proceed to touch genitals. Couple hours later we say fuck swimming and all pile back into the cars. Because the spare seats on the pickup left, some people have to pile in back of the Suburbans. Something seemed a little off at the time, but we chalked it up to the booze. We keep driving up the road counting the mile markers as we went up. The road to the site was a shitty gravel road off the main road, past mile marker 20. We head up the road a ways and have to stop because a tree is across the path. Not that large of a tree, so we all pile out and get it off to the side. We all climb back into the cars and once again something seems off. Did we forget someone? Asks Nick. We concluded that we had the 18 people that we needed, but something still felt odd. Eventually we make it up to the site. Obviously this wasn't an actual campsite and I have no idea how my friends found it, but apparently they had gone to this spot a few times before and never had any problems with the law. It was about 7 miles down the gravel road, deep into the forest of evergreens. It was surrounded on all sides by thick walls of trees. It was a pretty good sized spot, but more importantly it was secluded, which was exactly what we needed for the night. There was a large fire pit in the middle, but the stones around it had apparently been scattered around the clearing. The pickup is parked there but no people are outside and the camp is like 10% set up. We decide to fuck with the Shannon and her boyfriend Kyle, but when we came up on the truck we saw them fully clothed just kind of sitting in the back. Nick bangs his hand on the window and I swear they about jumped out of their skins. They realize who it is and come out, a little shaken but laughing. We ask what had them so rattled and they explain that they had started setting up camp about an hour ago. We know what they did for the first hour or two, when they stopped to have a smoke break. They said they had been by the fire pit when a really gross smell started to come from the woods. They had gone to the edge of the clearing when they had heard low voices babbling off in the woods. They noped the fuck out and locked themselves in the truck. Immediately we were blamed for fucking with them until I pointed out that about an hour ago we were all trying to move a tree that they left for us in the middle of the road. All around confusion when they said there had been no tree on the way up, but whatever, Oregon has a lot of trees and they fall over sometimes because trees are stupid like that. These two were probably just paranoid from the weed. We finish setting up the camp as the sun begins to set and begin the preparations for the night. We make some food, but with 20 people it goes pretty quickly. We continue drinking, smoking, and having a good time, as the sun got lower and disappeared. It was about 10:30 when one of the girls comes running out of the woods screaming bloody murder. Everyone stops what they're doing and listens to her sob about a person out in the woods. She said his back was to her and he was just kind of looking at the ground. When she called out to it, it raised its head and started twitching. This was when she realized it wasn't one of us and got the hell out of there. Most of the guys there were drunk and immediately angry at this guy in the woods. We decided it must be Wayne fucking with us, and so an elite squad of drunken high schoolers armed with varying sizes of branches went out towards where she saw it. We split up briefly in the woods, which was a very eerie feeling, and after about 15 minutes we decided we had scared Wayne off. We were regrouping back at the camp when the smell started again. The only thing I can describe it as is the smell of burnt hair plus the metallic smell of having a bloody nose, only 10 times worse. One or two of the drunker people actually vomited. One of the guys, Sam, decides he's had enough and wants to go back. After some debate we decided that he was probably sober enough to drive and that we would let him take a full pickup load back to his house. The girl from the woods, her boyfriend, Sam, and a second girl leave in the truck. The smell had died down quite a bit. Don't want to be labeled a pussy. Ignore that shit, I'm a drunk teen.pdf. We continue drinking and having fun, ignoring the feeling of something being off. Eventually I have to pee, so my friends Fletcher and Heston, referred to as Skeeter by our friends, walk down the gravel road a few hundred feet to drain the main vein. As we're peeing we notice someone in the middle of the road a little ways down. I'm a little uneasy, but Skeeter is a big dude, went on to play college football as a linebacker, so I figure we'd going to be okay. We walk up on the person, who has their back to us once again. I recognize that sweatshirt. Sam is standing in the middle of the road, in the dark, looking at the ground. Once again something seems off, but I can't quite place it, so we start to call out to him. No response. Start walking towards him and his head lifts up and can see him twitching. I finally realized what was so off. The woods around us are dead silent and have been for some time. I stop my two friends and whisper this to them. Skeeter doesn't think it's a big deal, but Fletcher is an avid hunter and agrees that something isn't right. We look back at Sam and he is about half as far away as he was before, back still turned and twitching, looking like he was doubled over, silently laughing. That did it for Skeeter and we all sprint back to the campground. The rest of the group is looking at us worriedly because all of us, even the giant-ass Skeeter, are pale as a sheet, stammering about how we need to leave. There is a large argument about how none of us can drive because we're all too drunk and that if we're trying to mess with them it's not very funny. The smell comes back, worse this time, and I actually vomited, mostly beer. Branches begin to snap around the outskirts of the camp. We can only hear this because the forest hasn't hit unmute yet. Fletcher, the hunter, looks like he's about to shit himself as he points out that a four-legged animal wouldn't make sounds like that when walking, only a bipedal one. That's when we hear it. A low guttural voice comes out of the woods. Give me a fucking beer. Would have been comical if I wasn't already shitting myself and the voice had been normal. It sounded like a dog mixed with a woman screaming, with irregular pauses and volume adjustments. Help me fuckers. Mass fucking panic. People running to cars, manage to get one of the subs filled and send it off with the designated drunk driver, my friend Nick. We fill the other Suburban and I'm left outside to put out the fire. Well, drunken on, 18 years ain't a bad run. Dead fucking sprint to throw the water bucket over the fire, Usain Bolt it back to the car. Probably could have gotten a full ride if someone timed me. Dive over the 2 full rows of seats and take my spot in the very back. We make it back to the main road and are about halfway back to town when we see the other Suburban in a ditch with everyone around it. Drunk ass Nick crashed. Nick won't really meet eyes with anyone and is muttering something under his breath. I get closer to him and realize he's reciting the Hail Mary under his breath. He won't acknowledge me and looks pale as a sheet. The smell is back. We are trying to figure out what to do when the whole road is lit up like day. One of those huge, lifted trucks with about 1 million lights on it pulls up to us. It stops and shines its lights on us for what seems like an hour, probably more like a minute though. The lights cut off and Wayne hops out, his gun in hand. Pretty uneventful from here, crams the people from First Suburban into his pickup. Asks each one of us for our names before he lets anyone get back into any car. Drops us all at our friend's house and leaves. Nick gets a fat ticket and a suspended license for DUI and leaving the scene of the accident, but his mom's Suburban seems okay. He killed himself about 3 months later. He had been complaining about lack of sleep and I think the whole experience really fucked with him. Skeeter and I ran into Wayne again, later that summer at the lake. We saw his truck at a popular swimming hole and went to ask a few questions. He seemed pretty honest about most things until I asked him why he had been so intent on asking us all of our names the night he picked us up, because we assumed he was planning on reporting us to the Rangers or something, but we never heard anything about it, besides Nick. I'll never forget his answer. When I pulled up to you guys I counted 17 people, but when I asked for your names I only got 16. One of your little friends walked back into the woods when I had my lights on him. Of course it sounded like bullshit to me until I began to think of the events that night. Starting with the swimming hole, there had been something off about the trip that I hadn't realized until we had gotten into the cars. There had always been an extra person with us. I think they slipped in during the swimming and slipped out when we were moving the tree. It came back in when we sent out our little hunting party and must have slipped back out when we were all drinking, only to come back into the group when we were all shitting ourselves trying to get out of there. That's why I had to sit in the back, because we had an extra person that put us over the seat limit. I don't think it was ever in my car though. I think my friend Nick noticed it in his car and that's what made him crash. That's what made him cry and pray that night, and I guarantee that's what made him kill himself. Sounds like something from a movie. Local Wayne came out of nowhere. Warn you people. Of course stupid teenager won't listen, proceed to get fucked by skinwalker whatever. Link to the article of sheriffs investigating Mountain Man's murder. Dude, Victoria and pretty much eastern states of AUS are Yowie Country. They always do that fucking yowling/screaming bullshit, and they like to check out campsites and other bullshit. Yowie tame. Be now, 19. Road trip-ish thing with friend. Be driving a flatbed with a car on the back because it is my friend's sister's car. We are better than FedEx. Driving down some bumfuck road and it's getting late. Decide to pull over to sleep. I decide to climb into sister's car to sleep so we each have a car to sleep in. More space reasons, etc. Hours later, woken by awful noise of gurgled screaming comes from off the place. What the fuck? Make sure doors are locked and text friend who responds, but we decide to go back to sleep because we both believe in Yowies. Decide to ignore. Sleep. Wake up for some reason. Check watch. It is 2:43 a.m. Hear sound coming from back of car. Sit up from where I am curled across the back seat. Wait for eyes to adjust to darkness. Something is on the back of the flatbed outside the car, hanging on. Suddenly very afraid. Thing is pretty fucking big, and dark colored. It's fucking dark, I don't know. Grab my trusty fucking dolphin torch. Shine that shit through the window. I am a fucking idiot. It's a fucking monster, oh my god, why? Matted fur with all burrs and shit caught in it. Looks like dirt rubbed in there, could be stuff growing from it. What the fuck is this bullshit? Big hand is gripping the side of the flatbed. Fingers huge and gnarled curling over the edge. Eyes have that weird shiny thing that cats do. What the fucking fuck? Friend's light comes on from truck, shining back at us. Hear his window go down. Begin screaming as I realize it isn't hauling itself up onto the flatbed. Can hear sound of window going back up with a whir. It's this fucking tall. Friend starts truck. Rips away from the thing. It lets go. We drive for ages until we reach a servo. Pull over so I can change my fucking pants and get back in the truck.
Sailor Gilliams is only alive today because last year she dyed her hair red. One afternoon last March, the 22-year-old was hiking a trail in Santa Barbara, California, with her friend Brendan Vega, also 22. Their inexperience showed, the terrain was more treacherous than they had planned for, and as it began to grow dark, they struggled to find a way back to their car. Then, Gilliams landed badly when jumping off a rock, fracturing her left leg. Things only got worse from there. Their cell phones were dead, and they hadn't brought flashlights. When Vega tried to carry Gilliams, he fell, shattering his glasses, breaking his elbow and breaking her ankle. In a matter of minutes, the couple's pleasant day outdoors had become a nightmare. Unable to walk, Gilliam stayed put while Vega went to get help. That was the last time she saw him. I was yelling for help all night and the rest of the next day, even though I was losing consciousness, Gilliams told the Huffington Post. At some point I didn't think anyone would find me. No one would save me and I would end up dead. By the next afternoon, her lungs had given out and she had stopped screaming. Gilliams lay face down in mud and leaves, delirious, surrounded by buzzing flies. Around this time, 3 hikers approached the area. One of them, Nicole Gergen, saw a flame of red hair out of the corner of her eye. Then I saw it move. Sailor Gilliams was airlifted to Cottage Hospital. 2 days later she learned that Vega had been found dead, most likely from falling as he went to find help.
B11. Living in Alaska at the time. Go out to take a piss, it's about midnight at this point, it's also dark 'cause winter. Pull pecker out, it shrivels back in. Piss through zipper and start to look around. See a completely black figure standing on 3 feet of snow. No lie, its hair looked like Gaku's, but not as exaggerated. I'm still pissing. We lock eyes and I finish. Ran upstairs, left the lights on. As I try to fall asleep I get a super weird feeling. My door cracks open and I see an ILMAO shadow above my door. I tried to debunk it as the shadow from my ceiling fan. As I try to fathom what it is, it slides out of room. Fall asleep in the fetal position. Backstory this time. Dicking around with friends walking down a pretty shady path, still in Alaska BTW. See dilapidated house. Hey, let's go bust out the windows. When we open the door we get hit with a noxious scent. Imagine skunk mixed with decay. Hey, this place smells like shit. Ha ha ha, where are the windows? Smash out the windows on the bottom floor. Go upstairs via transient built ladder. See 2 purses and 2 sleeping bags up top. Like the little troglodytes we are, we ransack the purses. Me, being of a more intelligent stock, decide to finger through the dozen or so books that are lying around. Pick up a witchcraft book that looks as if it hasn't even been opened once. First page I open it to is a satanic ritual involving the sacrifice of children. I want to shit my pants, but I'm with cutie pies that I want to impress. Show them the page I randomly open to. LOL, anon, that's freaky. XD. Pick up a rather old book about masks. Again decide to randomly open it. Demonic masks. I can't hold in my shit anymore. Well, see ya guys, I gotta go home. What, anon, don't go, it's scary. Okay, I'll stay. Manage to get them to look around the sides of the house. As we approach the backyard we all hear a very hoarse voice yell, "Get out!" We GTFO. More to come. Can't sleep because of what I saw and heard. Decide to pull an all-nighter. Around 4 a.m. I leave my room to go take a piss. I have yet to learn how to use a piss bottle. A panel to the shades on the sliding door that leads to backyard was missing. Through the crack of the missing panel I see a 7-foot-tall completely white figure. Imagine Slendermen, but 99% white. The figure had no facial features, had a white suit, and a red tie. It takes me a second to realize what the fuck I just saw. When I walk backward to see it again I notice its body turn towards me. I nope to the shitter, do my pisses and haul ass back to my safe room. Next night. Same fucking scenario except worse. Nothing on the way to the shitter. But while on shitter I hear a hoarse laugh. Intensify my shit so I can run to my haven faster. This assumption turns out to be false. As I'm walking out of the bathroom I see the white figure walking away from a window. Only see its arm. Rake hands. More to come. The third night and probably the worst. Again in the famous lieu of hauntings. Nothing odd happening and I'm thinking all that blew over. Not. Hear my heavy ass door to the garage open slightly and close fully. Hear small light pitter-pattering footsteps. Look at myself and hope that was an auditory hallucination. Side note, The outer door to the garage was locked and my garage doors are nigh impossible to open without using the remote. Go back to room and try to sleep. My fucking door cracks open while I'm looking at it. Nope the fuck out of my common sense and pretend to fall asleep, fake snoring and everything. Hear my floor creaking as if someone is walking on it. No, someone is walking on it. Nothing happens for a second or so. It takes a seat at the end of my bed next to my feet. Pull myself into the fetal position at 99.99% the speed of light. It almost kind of jolted back up and sped walk out of my room. The next night. Again I have yet to master the piss bottle. Walk into bathroom and look into the mirror. I don't see myself, but instead I see the white figure that I saw before. Like the figure is actually me or something. I don't see it as the 7-foot-tall humanoid, but instead see it in my proportions. I blink and that fades away. Nothing of note happens for a week or so. Week after the morphing incident. I'm at my fellow QT Pi troglodyte's house. Hey, have you seen a figure about 7 feet tall, full white suit, and a red tie? Yeah, about 3 days after we went to that house in Annette and I saw something like that knocking on our door and then running around our house. And you didn't call the fucking police? No, we thought it was you. I leave it at that and change subjects. I talk to Annette and she confirms the story almost verbatim. She also tells me she saw it in her room in the reflection of her mirror. More to come, but not much. I never really felt any malicious intent or malignant force coming from the white entity. But I still don't understand why it would choose to be so around the bush with me and straight up scare the shit out of my friends. Side note, I never broke any windows in the house and I tried to put things back where they were. Any ex-Phils have a clue on what the fuck happened to me or my friends?
2007. Fucked up Woods thread? Fucked up Woods thread. Here's mine to get things started, sorry in advance, it's TLDR. 17. Me and my best friend decide we're gonna go stay at his parents' cabin. They're cool with it. My parents think we're just staying at his house for the long weekend. Long story, but my parents are weird about letting me do things. His parents drive us up to the cabin and help us get all our food and stuff inside. We agree on a meeting time 3 days from now. They take off. Best friend and I get each other all hyped up. We're running around like retards. Get our paintball guns and decide to go shoot shit in a woods. Get some basic supplies together and take off. He knows this area really well, so I let him take the lead. We end up next to a river. Shooting at the fish, the birds, whatever. Suddenly he stops. He's looking at the top of this cliff in the distance. Do you see that? He asks. Can't see shit, Captain. Gets out his binoculars and hands them to me, tells me where to look. He's looking at this one tree that's noticeably taller than the others. So? He says he doesn't remember that being there. Obviously I'm not really that freaked out. There's no way he remembers every single tree out here. Tell him he's being an idiot and that it's probably just grown since he last saw it. Well then, why are there no leaves on it? Look at it again. I mean, yeah, it's kind of weird looking, but maybe lightning hit it or something. Can't figure out why he's being so weird about it. Eventually get him to move on. Later that evening, we've got a campfire going in the fire pit out back. Break out the bottle of Jack we managed to get for the occasion. Well on our way to being hammered, lightweights. Friend decides it'll be funny to antagonize any Bigfoots or whatever that might be lurking nearby. Hey you fucking Bigfeet. Come out and fight me. Nearly pissing ourselves laughing. Friend digs a smoldering piece of wood from the fire and flings it into the woods. As soon as he flings it, something crashes into the woods behind us. Both of us nearly shit bricks. Friend wants to go back inside. He's got that same weird expression and he seems really uneasy again. Ask him what the fuck is up with him. He reluctantly tells me that he's supposed to go inside if this kind of thing happens. Says who? Says his parents. This is totally not like him and I keep trying to get him to tell me what the hell is going on. He says if we can just go inside he'll tell me whatever I want. Agree, we go inside. This next part is easier if I just write it out. We both grew up near the Warm Springs Res out in Central Oregon, so the culture kind of bled over into ours. A lot of us growing up heard about the Wendigo and Skinwalkers, not always by those names but the idea was the same. So we get inside and he starts telling me about how when he came up here the first time his parents made him promise that if he ever felt like something was wrong, or saw something that he knew was wrong, he was to come inside right away and lock all the doors. He said the only thing they'd ever tell him was that there were things up here that were very old and looked like things they weren't. Nothing had ever happened to him before, but he'd also always followed their instructions. And you know, I kind of didn't even question it after that. My family wasn't into the whole thing, but I'd seen some shit while a different friend and I were tripping in the desert, another story, and I respected that he wanted to follow what they said. We stayed inside until the next morning.
My stepdad loves to tell this one story every Halloween. B. Stepdad. 17. 1978. Grow up in rural Tennessee. One of his favorite things to do: hiking, hunting, fishing, real outdoorsman stuff. One day he and a friend of his called Billy were fixing to do a weekend-long camping trip in some woods a few miles from their homes. They left their bikes by the opening to a trail and just hauled their equipment by themselves. They set up camp after a while, finding a nearby river to possibly fish from. As they set up camp together and start a fire, Billy asks my stepdad to have a listen around. Apparently for the last few hours there hadn't been any kind of noise, not even insects, but my stepdad chalks it up to their presence. Stepdad and Billy spend Friday night alone in the woods eating food cooked over a fire, shooting the shit, usual stuff teenagers in the 70s would do. Around 1 a.m. my stepdad is in the tent they'd set up earlier in the day when he hears what he for sure knows is a person. He keeps intently listening to wonder what this person is doing, but he still tries to act like he's asleep in case it's some serial killer or backwoods weirdo. Stepdad hears, "Hey Danny," in a very concerned tone of voice, almost scared even. Stepdad has no clue who the fuck Danny even is. "Danny." This voice apparently cries out in desperation again. Strange guy who's looking for Danny fucks off after a few seconds or so. Stepdad tries to sleep but struggles, thinking someone might be lost or dead. Next morning comes and he talks Billy into seeing if they could try and look for the stranger and his friend Danny. Billy agrees and they head off to the woods. Billy tells stepdad that he's still yet to hear any animal noises, which stepdad shrugs off. As they continue trekking through the woods looking for lost strangers, stepdad asks Billy not to split up as that's dangerously stupid, but cover more ground by distancing themselves. Billy agrees to this and they separate by 10 feet. They separate by 10 feet, stepdad goes deeper into some more woodland to search. He keeps sight of Billy and they frequently call out to each other to make sure they're still within reach. Stepdad keeps walking alone the woodland looking for any signs of people having been there recently. He's keeping track of any footprints or other signs of anyone. He calls out to Billy but doesn't hear back immediately. He sits still for what he guessed was 10 to 15 minutes calling out for Billy. "Billy. Billy." He stops when he hears someone else calling Billy's name. The other voice calling out Billy's name scares him and he looks around his surroundings, then sees someone sitting up in a tree. "Billy. Billy." This person, as he describes, had somehow been up there this entire time and had no idea how he hadn't spotted him. This person is some shade of deathly pale, wearing almost nothing, covered in lesions, open bloody sores, and what looked like pus dripping from open scab-like markings. Stepdad nervously backs away before the strange guy just drops and lands perfectly on the ground and flashes him this very wide and unnatural smile. "Billy. Billy." He describes creepy guy's voice as what it'd sound like if the Wizard of Oz had taken a can opener to his vocal cords. Creepy guy catches up with stepdad somehow. He never fully figured how he'd managed to be face to face with him so quickly. The creepy guy then proceeds to cup my stepdad's face into his hands with that smile still on his face. "Back off, you faggot." Stepdad yells at him before running from him. Stepdad collides into Billy soon after and tells him what happened. They see creepy guy just standing there with his smile and they run for it. Somehow creepy guy is keeping up with them. Stepdad decides to do the brightest thing imaginable and jump into the river. After jumping in they relax and let the current take them away from creepy guy. Creepy guy is still running parallel to them and cackling. Eventually they lose sight of creepy guy. Stepdad and Billy just let the current take them out for a while before swimming back to the riverbank. By then it'd been almost dusk. They reach a small campground area and climb out the river, ask one of the campers for a ride back home. Apparently the distance they'd traveled by river they were 2 towns over from where they'd started. Stepdad never sees creepy guy again but still goes outdoors, keeps a shotgun from then on.
A while back a friend invited me to go with him down to Mexico. He was going to visit an old friend of his named Mariana, a fucking absolute cutie pie. I'd never been, and it sounded like fun. Something kinda spooky happened though. Friend and I are staying at Mariana's family's house. Lots of people there, uncles and aunts and lots of kids. Most of us have to sleep on the floor, on pallets. Middle of the night I wake up and see Mariana talking to one of her uncles in the kitchen. They're whispering back and forth, sounds serious. The uncle leaves, his name was Miguel. Next morning, everyone's wondering where Miguel is. Mariana tells them that he went to some place out in the middle of nowhere. She used a specific word when referring to this place, but I can't remember it for the life of me. It was some well-known area out in the middle of nowhere. I'm wondering why everyone is so freaked out, and Mariana tells me. A month ago, 2 of my cousins went missing. We were all here having a party. A few of us slept in pallets in the kitchen, and when we woke up, 2 of the pallets were empty. She said that they went out looking for the missing kids, when they heard one of them crying out. He was saying I'm here but they couldn't figure out where the voice was coming from. They moved through the cactus and brush into this large space where nothing was growing, and they could hear his voice yelling at them from in the ground. Their grandma rushed over and started saying some weird prayers that Mariana had never heard. She's super Catholic. Grandma takes her shawl and wraps it around the branch of a large bush growing out of the ground. Later that day, one of the kids returns home. He's covered in dirt and bruises, and he's crying. After making sure he's okay, they ask him where the other kid is and he says that the little men have him. Fuck, didn't think this would be so long. Anyway, I'm thinking WTF but Mariana just said it like it was normal. So I ask her, what little men? And she described these little creatures that look like people that run around in the Mexican desert. I had a friend that was taken by them when I was a kid. We were playing late at night and this little man kept calling us from behind a tree. He said he knew a really good game and that we should play with him. Mariana's friend went over with the little man but Mariana got scared and ran home. Her friend was never seen again. Now Miguel is missing, and everyone is getting ready to go back to that clearing in the middle of nowhere. Grandma tells me and my friend that we can stay at the house, but my friend insists on us going. The fuck? When we get there, we find something in the clearing. A big blue clay bowl that was shattered, and a large wooden stick that was sharpened to a point. Both of them have weird letters written on them in red paint. Grandma tells everyone to take the kids and go back home, she'll stay behind. On the way back Mariana tells us she's going to give us a ride back to her apartment in the city. I might have to stay here with my family for many days. She drops us off and that was the last time I saw her. Friend and I had a great time in the city just eating badass food and exploring. I asked him later if he knew what happened and he said Mariana was vague about the whole thing. But apparently Miguel and his son came back the same day that we left. Her grandma disappeared though and nobody knows where she went.
Alright/x/. I don't really trust therapists, and my dad won't talk to me about it. I would have gone on ignoring this, too, if I hadn't started having the nightmares again. I need to get this off my chest, and maybe find some closure. I'm not going to Greentext everything, but a lot of it will be. I'm pre-typing this in Notepad, and just trying to stay cohesive. I live in the high desert of Oregon. I won't go into any more specifics, For obvious reasons. There's 3 characters to this story, me, my dad, and a friend from soccer, Nick. I'll include some pics as they become relevant of similar places in the Badlands, from Google. I don't have any original pictures of this as back then my phone was a piece of shit just for texting and calls and I wasn't into photography, so I never got a camera. Be me. 15, fall of 2012. Live in a fairly rural part of town, like to be outside, and as I'm homeschooled, Dad tries to get me into extracurricular sports. I make it onto a soccer team that's not really an official team, but it's something to do and I don't get fat, Dad is happy, etc. Make a friend, great forward, his name is Nick. I'm not changing his name because Nick is a fucking common name and I'm bad at making new ones. There's somewhere around 80 Nick people in that town anyways. Towards the cooler season, we 3 decide to go camping. Dad's happy because it's a guy's trip, and that I have a friend. Nick is happy because he doesn't go that often. I'm happy because I love the desert. Take my family's 2 dogs, German Shepherds, and stuff for a 2-day trip. Dad has 3 guns, 2 .22 pistols and a .22 rifle. The pistols are for emergency home/car defense, the rifle is for small game sometimes. They're not big guns but we've never really needed them. Head out to the Badlands. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Pacific Northwest, or Oregon. It is mostly rainy, wet, green, mossy, lush, you name it. However, smack in the lower half of Oregon, there's the Badlands wilderness. The Badlands is fucking intense. Hot as hell in the day, cold as balls at night, and it never really changes by season, just gets colder or hotter. I won't get into the dangerous desert electrical storms. It's full of brush, rock, and thousands of acres of endless sand and short scrub trees, and deadwood. It's like a graveyard, most times, because of all the bones and shit out there. I love it still, even after this, but it's a really, really harsh place to the unprepared. We have hikers die out there yearly just from weather. A decent amount of it is hiking trails, owned land, etc. But the vast majority of it is undeveloped wasteland. We camp in the wasteland. Drive to a trailhead, walk in a few miles, and then weave off. Dad and I have walked our dogs out here numerous times. We know where we are and where we're going, and there's more landmarks in the way of stones and shit. Dogs are off lead, just doing dog things. Nick, Dad, and I all talking, generally just being dudes, etc. Make it a good 5 or 6 miles off the trail before dark. It's a bit dusky, beautiful sunset, all that shit. Set up in between some rocks. I would have pictures but this was years and years ago. They've been since lost and my phone was dog shit at that time anyways. No fire because law-abiding citizens. Got some cook stoves and shit though. Pop it up outside the tent, roast some hot dogs and BS like that over the tiny ass flame. It's absurd but fun and we're all enjoying it. Dogs get a bit weird as the evening goes on. These are not couch potato ass dogs. One of them was a Schutz Hunt competitor, Reed, trained guard/sport dog. The other was an adopted adult that was generally just a good boy. Commence enjoyment anyways. Dogs eventually settle down, but on alert, low growls. We figure they're just new to this particular area, or maybe there's a scavenger animal. The night passes without any issue. Get up next morning, eat some shitty camp breakfast that we all love because we're outdoors. Dad takes a nap, keeps the .22 pistols but gives Nick and I the .22 rifle. I'm responsible enough to handle it and Nick's not a total retard. Maybe we plink some rabbits or some shit, we think, but really we're just taking pot shots at dead trees and rock formations like retards, squeezing off shots and playing around with the scope. Neither of us are a bad shot, and we're just out exploring and being 15 and 16-year-olds, basically. We have compasses and packs and like I said neither of us are full potato. I'll cut the green text for a bit more of a description for this place. It's about a mile north of the broken rock formation where we were camped, across some flat nothingness. It's a small grove-esque clusterfuck of rock chunks and dead trees, maybe a living juniper or two. Not big, not thick, more spread out than lush. Enough cluster to be shady and notably a bit of an oasis from the waste. Nick and I have no fucking idea what's in there if anything. Could be some coyotes, man, hardcore as hell. We Rambo our asses up there, crouching like it's Skyrim, slowly creeping in. I've got the rifle drawn and a round chambered. It's the desert, though, and we're still being loud enough that no small game would stick around for us anyways. It's quiet, and there's no animals in sight. As we get into the copse/rock and tree cluster, it darkens up a bit and gives a really neat aesthetic to the whole deal. We stop creeping like retards and stand up, and check out the whole area, probably a solid 400 or 500 square feet of loosely collected rock spires/chunks, logs, dead trees, and a couple living trees. Some of the logs and branches fell against a bent tree and some stone like a little natural hut/thicket/whatever. There's a bunch of bones and collected detritus inside, nothing artificial, but there's some stiff, long dead and dried animal hide scraps. The sand is dark, just general appearances of being a den of sorts. Nick's interested and I'm not too fazed as this isn't my first time outdoors nor in the Badlands. You get piles of animal bones pretty often if you're looking several miles out. Coyotes just gnaw the fuck out anything dead and leave them in piles. Den smells like a fucking garbage heap mixed with sulfur, absolutely atrocious. We tfo from that noise after the smell hits us. Continue to inspect the grove, and from now on in the story I'm calling it the grove. There's a climbable tree, technically most of them are, but this one's the most sturdy looking. The problem with Badlands trees is that they're incredibly fragile and breakable, given that even when they're alive, they're very dry. Finding one that my ass can get up without snapping is difficult, as my height and weight are not compatible for these types of things. Prop myself up about 12 feet or so, take a look with the scope, pretty cool. Drop down, Nick's back to looking at the den. We should come back later and see if its owner is home. Technically, even if this owner was home, it wouldn't have been legal to kill it unless this was Monty Python's death rabbit, as we didn't have any tags or licenses for coyote or otherwise. Still think it'd be cool to snag a look at something in its home. Nick's never seen this, and though I've seen, and shot, many coyotes, I've never seen one at home. We agree to do so, but with the dogs just in case. Coyotes are cowards, but this might be a group hideout and we don't want to get nipped before we gun them down for self-defense if necessary. Continue fucking around the rest of the day, go back to find that Dad has walked the dogs and come back, small cook stove fire going. The minute we walk into the camp though, the dogs get very, very upset with us. They sniff us gingerly, and then back away, growling, doing that leaning head tilt like they don't understand. Don't let us near them for a while, they always keep a few feet away and then return to being alert. We tell Dad what we found about a mile up and he tells us about his walk. He agrees to come with us and bring the dogs, if only because he wants to see it too. Evening again, not quite dusk, I'm watching a rabbit fuck around in the distance with the scope, before I get bored and look around in the distance with it. It's absolutely beautiful, the dark stone and brown sand contrasting with the bleached gray trees, the purple sunset, the white thing. Nigga what? Swing the scope back to the white thing, which was previously perched, to my knowledge, on one of the stones in the distance. It's gone now, but I would have bet money on it. Pausing Greentext again for this preliminary description. I didn't really see it too well the first time, on the rock, but it was crouched, either quadrupedal and standing or bipedal and sitting with its arms and hands on the ground. It wasn't especially big at first, but that may have been the distance. Bleached white like a bone, not really much detail at the range I was in. Continue observing for the white thing, maybe it's a pale coyote or something else, but don't catch a glimpse of it. Based on where I saw it, it was maybe directly or slightly off-kilter to our west. Ask Dad if coyotes can be albino. Basically get a response of yes you fucking retard aren't you in school. Shrug, call it an albino coyote and forget about it. Fast forward through some idiot shenanigans and conversation to true dark. Laying in tent, dogs inside with us. Also pick related, it's close to the grove, just add more trees. Suddenly the younger one goes berserk, a few seconds before the other one joins in. Making jerks between sides of the tent, which is relatively large to service 3 men and 2 dogs, just pacing around it, growling, barking, hackles up, they look like monsters. I've never seen these dogs quite like this, it's full on defensive/offensive posture. Genuinely thought they were going to attack us for a few seconds, before I got awake enough. Smell of garbage and sulfur is back, though faint. Dad wakes up, Nick and I can smell it but he doesn't seem to be bothered, and we don't mention it and neither does he might have smelled it but who knows, I don't think he did at that point. Steps outside the tent, dogs run out in front of him the very millisecond the door unzips, and begin pacing the length of the tent and our little camp area. Dad puts their leashes on and says well we may as well go now, didn't get as much of a nap as I wanted but it's about midnight. Fucking Dad and his fucking naps. The dogs are still on defend and destroy, red alert 9000 or some shit, looking around erratically, constantly pulling against the leashes. Finally my dad snaps at them to heel and shut up and they do so, albeit still grunting and growling. We all piss into the desert sands like men, and one of the dogs loosens his lizard too. Grab the headlamps and 2 flashlights and we're off, Dad carrying a .22 pistol, Nick holding the other one. Nick moment, holy shit. This is so cool. Nick's parents never gave him guns, in hindsight it was probably autistic to give him one but he's not a retarded guy and it's a fucking .22. I, of course, proudly bear the .22 rifle. We head north, it's a pretty simple walk back to the grove, dogs are still not pleased by this venture. Breaking Greentext to talk about my dogs a bit more, and my dad, myself, and Nick, physically. Max was slightly smaller of the two, and a few years older. He wasn't as quick on the draw, ever, but was still a very sturdy and reliable animal. He made you feel safe, but was generally more high-strung. Beaver was the larger and younger of the two, laid back, but was trained from puppyhood to be a god among animals. I'm about 5'9", was back then, too, and Nick was around 6 feet. We were both fit from soccer. Dad's about 5'11" and didn't age the best, but was still muscular. Everyone gets a potbelly. Max seems the most irritated, constantly breaking focus to bark once or twice before hushing on his own, and Beaver is a silent asshole, minding the leash but on tenterhooks of aggravation. We get to the grove and the garbage/burn smell is about 3 times as bad as when we were there the first time. The dogs straight up refuse to go in. Like, they actually refuse, they dig their heels in and Max begins growling and staring, before lurching back and forth as if unsure if he wants to bum rush the grove or stay put. Dad sighs and looks around, we can't leave them on their own because it's the desert in the middle of the night, but Dad doesn't want us out here alone. Oh, we can run in on our own and check, you're only a few 100 feet away anyways. Okay son, don't be long. I'm gonna sit down and look for constellations. Not sure if worst dad or best dad, but he's my dad, so it counts for something. Those few 100 feet become very long when you're behind gnarled wood and rock formations, in a shadowy black world, and you turn around and all you see is a lone light from a headlamp. Nick and I, however, emboldened by our guns and teenage idiocy, pressed on through and towards the smell. Pick related, Beaver. This time we really did make an effort to be quiet, almost crawling in the dark, our lights all off except one flashlight, which he held having only a one-handed gun. Behind the beginnings of the grove, however, that teenage strength began to fail me just a little. The putrid smell, the eerie darkness, and the lack of Dad made me somewhat unnerved. By our low light we estimated we were maybe 20 feet away from the area of the den. We were correct. However, we had to creep around to the front, having approached it from the back. Breaking Greentext here. As we cleared the backside of the den and were in the front, we heard a crack from nearby, as a very odd white creature fucking sprinted, almost too fast to notice in the low light, about 10 feet in front of us and into the den. If it wasn't for it being so white, the light might not have even caught it, and we might have played the crack off as an owl or other bird and been unaware that the den became occupied in front of our eyes. We did, however, both notice, and I kindly thank my dad for always preparing us with flashlights and other gear on journeys. The thing was rather tall, and not especially broad as it was long, but then, at first, we only caught the side view in low light. We froze, and here comes the part that haunted me for 2 years, almost every night, before it passed, and what has recently resurfaced. It all happened very quickly from here, and I'll try to not exaggerate details. Nick and I continued to get close, but this time, both of us had a round chambered and were pointing the guns at the den. We made our way until we were about 5 or 6 feet away from the entrance, and then flipped on our headlights. I don't know why we did that. I think it was our intent to startle it and be able to see it and then run. It was very startled, and let out a very disgusting, screeching growl bark. Like a short book that most canines do, but very ugly sounding. It was also higher pitched, and sounded like there was spit and snot behind it. It was very apparent to us at that moment that this wasn't a coyote. We bounced back a few feet, and the creature didn't emerge. We could still see it, but it was moving around inside the den in a bit of a frenzy. It made the scream growls a few more times, and Nick and I unanimously began to yell to each other to fucking run, dude. That was probably the biggest mistake of the night, but thankfully, neither of us suffered for it. What we should have done was open fire the minute we realized it wasn't a coyote. The second we turned and ran, I could hear sand and bone rattling and being tossed as it ran out after us. Nick squeezed off a few random shots, I think out of fear, and I managed to get up into a tree, about 5 or 6 feet in the air. Nick was right behind me, but instead chose a rock formation, about 10 feet away. He played forward, after all, so his sprints were harder than mine, and I think he just wanted to run at that moment. The white creature pursued Nick, backing off whenever he turned, and then leaping along after he looked away. It was a dangerous game that only took a few seconds to play, but it unfolded in slow motion for me. Nick popped off the rest of the 22 clip, and then the white creature began to scale the rock. I wasted only a second more before leveling the rifle and firing blindly. I could have hit Nick. I'm glad I didn't. I did, however, scare the white thing, or at least attract it. It left Nick and then bark screamed at me, leaping off the rock. I began shimmying up the tree, and in the darkness, I cracked my head against a branch sticking out directly over me. The mongrel began to climb the tree below me. In a daze, my vision blurring a bit, I popped another 2 or 3 shots. The clip of the rifle only has 6 rounds, and I kept that in mind. I figured I only had 2 left, as I wasn't counting very well, and didn't want to be overconfident. Nick's yelling at something, maybe the white creature, but then I hear a different pitch of scream. Nick just fucking threw the gun at the white creature, and hit it. Not hard, but those metal bastards weigh a couple pounds, and later on I realized why it hurt. Again, this whole sequence took maybe 30 seconds, but it felt so much longer. Then, as the thing is looking to climb again, I see it go flying off of the tree trunk. Beaver, Max, and Dad came to the gunshots and yelling, my dad several seconds behind. Beaver has just ripped the mongrel off of the tree by slamming into it and grabbing it. I'm unsure how many of you are dog people, but German shepherds have very boxy, broad chests and shoulders. If they leap at you and their teeth miss, they'll still knock you flying a few feet if they intend to. In this moment, time seems to totally slow down. Even in the nightmares, this particular sequence plays out very, very slowly. Nick and Dad are yelling, Max and Beaver are snarling and yelping, and my conked head, vision is starting to clear. The headlamp clearly illuminates this thing as it tries to deal with the dogs. It stands up. It's not quadrupedal, it's bipedal, and for 2 or 3 seconds, I got a very clear image that's burned forever into my head. It's tall, maybe 7 feet, and skinny as hell. I mean scrawny. Long forearms, long hind legs, all of it built like a dog. Somehow, even though it's so thin, I can't make out bones, but maybe it's the flash lighting and the white fur that's obscuring it. It's blisteringly white, stained now with red, either my dog's or its own blood. The neck is rather long, and it has a very long, pointed muzzle and face. No discernible ears or facial features. There's a gangly little tail, and its eyes and nose appear to be black, but I could be wrong on the eyes in the circumstance. It had teeth, but I couldn't tell you what kind. The forearm paws, hands, whatever, had fairly long digits and there were short claws on the end. I less saw them and more heard them make contact with the dogs. Overall, the thing most resembled a whippet or a greyhound in how skinny and long it was, and the face. It was built like a canine, as well, but it definitely stumbled around on 2 legs to get the advantage on the dogs, for many, many seconds. It wasn't just rearing, it was balanced like that, and its back and chest were appropriate for it. It looked natural to see it on 2 legs, basically. Again, I'm unsure if you're familiar with German Shepherds, but when they bite hard. They're the 3rd or 4th hardest biting dog in the world, pound for pound, if I remember correctly. When they bite down, they don't let go. Beaver, at least, had some great purchase on this thing's arm and I heard a loud crack and the most horrific bark scream released. Max was just snapping and ripping into whatever he could grab, I think. Dad didn't shoot, I don't think he wanted to hit the dogs, and I didn't either, so I didn't waste my shot. The dogs did good work, and I don't think this monster even wanted to fight, but we walked up on its house in the middle of ass-fuck nowhere. I hear a more normal yelp and Max's head gets drizzled in blood. The ugly thing flails and Beaver drops a few feet to the ground, as it had been swinging the dog a bit. It screamed again and then sprinted on its hind legs, and I lost sight of it after it left the grove. This is where the nightmares ended, at least. Max's ear had a hole in it, towards the middle, and had likely been bitten. It bled a lot but was minor, and he's had far worse. Beaver was unscathed. Thankfully, overall, none of us were really hurt. Blood was all over the clearing, and in both dogs' mouths. I crept down from the tree, and Nick got off the rock spire. I landed on the .22 handgun, where it had been thrown and knocked into the mongrel. Picked it up, shoved it in my pocket, and ran to my dad, too scared to cry. Nick was shell-shocked, as well. The dogs gave pursuit but my dad called them back. None of us said anything, really. We walked back to the campsite. I don't remember ever putting the rifle down, and Dad still had a fully loaded gun. The dogs were still aggravated, but seemed quieter, as if they believed the fight was over. We all stayed awake, sitting outside of the tent, my dad and I clutching guns, Nick just staring. Come dawn, we packed up and marched out, still not talking about it. When we got back into town, my dad looked at us in the back seat and said it was some kind of diseased coyote, and to not worry about it. We nodded, not really knowing anything else to say. None of us believed it. It was a short encounter, relatively, but we were all scared out of our minds, because that tall-ass white faggot wasn't a damn coyote. Nick and I neglected to really keep in touch once soccer season ended, and by then I had gotten a job, so I didn't sign up again. I tried to bring it up to Dad once, but he just shook his head and told me to stop thinking about it. We've never talked about it since. I've been out to the Badlands a few times since then, because I still love it, and my dad has too, having once been a part of search and rescue a few years ago. We've never seen anything, and though we don't mention it, we make a point to never go anywhere within 10 miles of the grove. I would really have loved to not ever think about this again, and for a few years, I haven't. I'm 20, now, and the last 2-ish years, it's mostly faded from memory. But in the past week, the nightmares are resurfacing. Likely because of stress from other things in my life, and I need to talk this out somewhere, so I put it here. So that concludes my story, /x/. If anyone has had a similar experience with that white hellspawn, or has questions, I'll probably be awake another hour or so. X/move slow, and I'll be back in the thread tomorrow. Beaver's older, but is still healthy, and Max's ear healed fine. He's past elderly now, and missing most of his teeth, but both dogs made it out okay, for those concerned. Finished. What you found was just a mod for Skyrim. No, it definitely wasn't a werewolf or anything similar. I've looked at all the descriptions. I put years into this thing and I have no idea, still, what it was. The only things it resembles aren't canine at all, really. That seems about right. I know it was in range of a clusterfuck like that, but after looking on the maps and the satellite view, it's difficult to pinpoint it more exactly than that. It's probably fairly accurate. I'd have to get out there to be more exact, and bear in mind it's been a long time since I've been out near the grove. He did, like I said, the sequence of events was very short. He came. Pig also related, sort of. It's the dog breed this thing most resembled. That type of really skinny build and long neck and head. No ears, though, still. May have had them, but I didn't see any. Going to actually get to work on the sketch now. Someone can work with this, right? Anyone. Polish the basic idea, make it more a not shit. Trips here, with the drawing I promised. Can you give me more details on it? Which of the hands is right, a better pose, 2 canine or 2 human? Skinny enough? I'll do a better sketch in a better pose, but I'll need more info, and to be out of class, to do that. Fuck, man. I got shivers looking at it. That's really close. The correct hand would be about a mix of the two, shorter digits than the right, longer than the left. Not quite like fingers, but longer than normal animal toes. It's a bit too human, needs to be more on the canine side. The head looks nearly exact, but the body is too human. Is this closer? I tried to fix the orientation while still keeping it reasonably able to be bipedal. Is there anything else you can tell about it? On mobile, hope it doesn't stupid up the picture. That's about perfectly on it. That's so damn uncomfortable to look at.
Be me. Hanging out in the woods at night. Stumble on what looks like an abandoned campsite. Tents are shredded, trash is lying around everywhere. Remember thinking that it was weird that people were camping this far into the woods. I was only a few miles in, but people cook meth and shit out here. Decide to look around the campsite some more. Spend a while trying to think of a rational explanation as to what the fuck could have shredded the tents and trashed the campsite so badly. Just as I'm about to leave, I hear something walk up behind me. Turn around, nothing. Start walking away from the campsite, hear the footsteps again. They were different this time, more like stomping. Turn around again. Absolutely goddamn nothing. Pick up the pace a little. If one of the meth cooks was trying to scare me, I definitely got the message. Walk about a mile, then shit got real spoopy. Hear footsteps again, but this time whatever the hell was behind me was sprinting fast. Start running, but the thing was keeping pace with me pretty easily. At one point it got so close I swore I felt its fucking breath on me. get out of the woods after what seems like hours of running. The thing stops dead in its tracks, like it didn't even slow down first, it just stopped. Didn't get a very good look at it, but I saw its silhouette. The thing looked skinnier than the pictures of concentration camp survivors that I had seen, and had legs that were longer than the rest of its body. Shine my flashlight on it, which I really wish I wouldn't have. The thing didn't have a mouth, just a mouth painted on with what I assumed was blood. Same thing with the eyes. Run into my house. Lock that bitch up tight, sleep in my bathtub with my shotgun at my side all night. I went back to that campsite the next day, and nothing was there. Not nothing as in the campsite had been cleaned up, nothing as in it looked like nothing had ever been there to begin with. Fuck this state.